Hello, Logan Albright here. Today I'm going to review a book I just finished reading. I'm amazed I haven't read it before, honestly, but it was given to me as a gift, and I read it for the first time, and it was really good. So let's talk about The Woman in White. Here I have The Woman in White. It's by Wilkie Collins. It was written in 1859. As you can see, I have a lovely Penguin Classics blue hardcover edition of it. It's very pretty. It's a fairly long book, about 650 pages. And it's one of the earliest kind of mystery detective novels. It doesn't have a detective in it per se, but it's definitely a mystery, and I think it really did a lot to establish that genre. It's been talked about as its relation to Gothic fiction, which I've talked about on this channel before, some Gothic novels. But the difference is that the Gothic novels usually took place in a foreign locale, woods, forests, mountains, kind of nature-y areas. And what Wilkie Collins has done is he's taken some of the ideas of the Gothic novel, a lot of the drama of it, and he's brought it into the city. He's brought it into a more domestic setting, and it set the stage for a whole new type of book. The Woman in White, basically in the plot, it starts off with the narrator, Walter Hartwright, he's an artist, an art teacher, and he gets summoned up to Cumberland in the north of England, and he is going to give art lessons to this young woman and her sister. And on his way there, he runs into this mysterious woman in white on the road who has just escaped from a lunatic asylum, it turns out. And he's like, what's going on here? Something is odd. And it all kind of snowballs from there. It's got a crazy mystery, suspense, thriller type plot. And one of the really unique things about this book, the thing I loved about it, is it's told from a first-person perspective. I just mentioned the narrator, Walter Hartwright, but the narration passes from one character to another. So it starts off with Hartwright, but then he has to leave town. And so the narrative is then picked up by another character who writes their portion of the narrative. And then it goes to someone else who writes their portion of the narrative. And it goes through like 5 or 6 different characters. And the characters in this book are very well defined. They have very distinct personalities, and it really comes through in the writing. So there's a character, Mr. Fairley, who's the uncle of the woman who Hartwright is teaching art lessons to. He's a very nervous and ornery hypochondriac, and at some point he has to write his thing, and Wilkie Collins does an amazing job of, it sounds like a nervous hypochondriac. His character is writing it. The style of writing completely changes when the narrator changes. There's another character called Count Fosco, who's this flamboyant, fat Italian who thinks very highly of himself, is highly educated, and he loves opera, and he loves animals. And when he narrates his portion, it's written in an extremely flamboyant style, and you can tell it's him. You almost don't even need to be told who's doing the narration, because you can tell from the style of writing who's doing it. So I thought that was a really clever, interesting device. It's all presented as if it's a case being presented in court, and everyone has their testimony put down. I haven't seen anyone else write a novel in that style before, and I thought it was not only unique but effective, and it was delightful the way he was able to change his narrative voice along the way. There's a lot of great devices in here that are used to build suspense. Like I already mentioned, there's a lunatic asylum, there's foreign intrigue, there's spies, there's secret societies, there's murder, there's mistaken identity, there's poisoning. It's got a lot of the great kind of action-y mystery tropes in it that make it a lot of fun to read. It's kind of a little bit slow in the first half. It's like putting the pieces in place and building the narrative. And then in the second half, it all kind of catapults to the end, and it really picks up and becomes quite a page-turner. So if you like kind of early mysteries, if you like Gothic fiction, if you like kind of Victorian setting, this is very Victorian. And it's actually the best book I've read in a long time. And it really spoke to me because I have mentioned before on this channel how much I love kind of Victorian fiction and how much I love English writing. And I've just got back from reading a bunch of American books, reading Faulkner and people like that, Louisa May Alcott. And so reading a really very distinctly English book from the Victorian period was really like a breath of fresh air to me. I love reading that kind of writing. And it's, when you've read a lot of books, it becomes hard to find ones that really grab you and really speak to you and feel unique and feel like something different. So I really like this one. So like I said, if you like early mysteries, Gothic fiction, Victorian fiction, this is a great place to dive in. Collins wrote many other books. The other famous one he wrote is called The Moonstone, which I haven't read, but I now intend to read pretty soon. But he wrote lots of other ones too that are less famous. So it's a pretty decent library to dig into if you want to read more of his works, and I certainly will be doing that myself. The Penguin edition is pretty nice. It's got a lot of notes in the back about various references that Collins makes. He makes a lot of references to popular culture at the time. He alludes to other authors like Dickens and other sensational writers at the time. It'll explain those. he talks about there's some legalese in here because he's talking about the law relating to the case at hand, the mystery at hand. Some of that will get explained. So it's nice to have those endnotes in there. It's always good when you're reading a particularly older book where you may not get some of the references to get an edition that has some notes in the back that will explain what's going on, because, you know, I pick up on a lot of them. There's a lot of biblical allusions. I pick up on most of those, but you don't pick up on everything. And so it's good to have, you know, some of those explained. I find it odd which ones they choose to explain, because sometimes it's like, it's extremely specific, like periodical of the, you know, contemporary Victorian London that no one who didn't live in that time would know about, and they explain that, and it's like, oh good, I'm glad they explained that. And then in the next reference it'll be like, oh, here's who Mozart was. It's like, everybody knows who Mozart was. You don't need to explain that. So that was a little uneven in here, but the notes in general are quite helpful for understanding a work this old and this dated. But the narrative itself is not at all dated, I don't think. It's very tightly plotted. It's very thrilling. You can nitpick some of the plotting, I think. There's some things that you might call plot holes. There's certainly criticisms you could make about it if you wanted to dive deep into it and really get into the nitty-gritty. But to me, it's the type of book where you're along for the ride. It's a thrill. It's fun. You know, you're not going to be super picky about every little detail because, you know, it's not about that. It's about just enjoying the story. And the story is very clever, tightly plotted, great characters, great narration, great devices, and it really did keep me on the edge of my seat all the way to the end. So that's what I thought of Wilkie Collins, The Woman in White, and I'll be reading more of his works in the future. Thanks for joining me. I've been Logan Albright. I'll be reviewing more books for you every week, so please check in, subscribe to my channel, click the notifications bell, and if you have other books you'd like to recommend, if you have thoughts on The Woman in White, if you have anything you want to say to me at all, feel free to leave it below in the comments, and I'll read it and I'll respond to it. Thank you very much. Have a good night.